Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Effron. I teach advanced television production and various and sundry other things here at Montclair State University. I missed the state because I just started here 3 months ago, so I'm still trying to get used to that. We have a wonderful panel today, and because of the shuttling back and forth of the mics, I will introduce both of our panelists now, and then we'll have the presentations, and then hopefully we'll have some time for good questions. Our first speaker will be Anastasia Plakias. She's a native New Yorker. She was born and raised in the West Village, where her experience in gardening was limited to growing lima beans on her 6th-floor apartment windowsill. As founding partner of Grange Rooftop Farm, the leading green roof farming business in the U.S., she's worn many hats over the years, not just straw farmer hats, right? She developed the farm's events program. She ran the sales department. She continues to manage communications and external affairs, focusing on creating strong and meaningful connections between the farm and the community it serves. Just this spring, she published The Farm on the Roof: What Brooklyn Grange Taught Us About Entrepreneurship, Community, and Growing a Sustainable Business. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, I'm not at the Future Farmers of America conference, right? You'll see when she speaks why it's so relevant to us as journalists looking to forge sustainability models. So no, you're in the right place. She co-founded the farm's sister nonprofit, City Growers, where she continues to serve as a board member. Her passion for educating others about food, farming, and entrepreneurship is outweighed only by her enthusiasm for obscure vegetable trivia. A published writer and photographer, a neophyte bird nerd, and an avid home cook, she's dedicated to making her native city a greener and more sustainable place to live. So Anastasia will be our first panelist. Our second panelist is Celeste LeCompte, is Director of Business Development at ProPublica, where she works with partners inside and outside the organization to develop new business and revenue opportunities. She's an editor and a product manager. She's developed and launched successful revenue-driven projects, including GigaOhm Research and the year-long environmental and tech reporting project Climate Confidential. She is also an award-winning business journalist whose writing focuses on innovation and the environment. So please, let's welcome both of our wonderful panelists, and we'll start with Anastasia. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for having me and for being here today. I am really excited to talk to you about what might seem an odd topic for a journalism conference, but I assure you there are overlaps between what you all work on and what I work on. Just give me 1 sec to get this up and running. Here we go. My name is Anastasia Plakias, and I am co-founder of Brooklyn Grange Rooftop Farm. I'm going to give you some quick background. We're going to move pretty quickly on what the farm is, what we do, because it's, of course, a long topic, but we only have so much time. The idea of our business was really to create a sustainable model for urban agriculture. We, being a couple of entrepreneurial folks, myself and my business partners, who were all practicing urban agriculture as a hobby, but really wanted to see it practiced as an industry. We felt that it was worthy of investment, and the only way for that to, for it to really scale to cities around the world was if others saw that it was worthy of investment as well. So before I get to our team, what does that mean? We heard a lot about sustainability in the keynote today, and I want to share our definition of sustainability with you. When we decided to start this business, we wanted it to be more than just an ecologically sustainable business. We wanted to respect the triple bottom line, right? The 3 Ps. So of course, profitability, but also the planet and the people on it. We wanted to really engage the community. And that's our definition of sustainability. Of course, profitability being the chief factor. You can't achieve either of the other two if you're out of business. And that's not always easy with farming. Fortunately, we have a very diverse team. And don't worry about reading all these words. The bottom line is each of these faces you see down at the bottom, these are my business partners and I, we all do really different things. Ben, our head farmer and president, he's our numbers guy. He's a data farmer. He harvests data. Gwen's a builder. And Chase is a contracts guy. I'm a storyteller, and we really all bring our specialties to bear on the business. What we do is not rocket science. People talk about innovation all the time. We're not reinventing the wheel here. Green roofs have been around for many, many, many years, and for several decades have been making major headways in cities. It's really just a very simple covering of a roof with vegetation, and what we aim to do was take the ecological benefits of green roofs and marry them with the economic and food-producing benefits of agriculture and farming. So, back in late 2009, early 2010, we set out to start our business. Our idea was to find a roof that was big enough that we could recoup the costs that we would invest in starting this business. There were a ton of challenges along the way. Finding a landlord who would give us a lease long enough was tough. But eventually, we raised $200,000 and built our flagship farm in Long Island City, Queens in 2010. In 2012, we received a large grant from the Department of Environmental Protection of New York and built our second farm at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. This was a wonderful, we used to say that we were profitable. And if you asked me in 2011, is your business profitable? I would say, absolutely, yes. We broke even in our first year and we're growing. And it was true. We were hitting our loan payments, we were paying our rent, but I was bartending nights and Ben was up on the farm, 80 hours a week, and it was by no means sustainable. It wasn't until we opened our Brooklyn Navy Yard farm and really scaled up that we started to become profitable. Why is the farm, what's the planet side of this? Let's get that out of the way because it's not as germane to our conversation today. Green roofs and rooftop farms are great for the planet for a number of reasons. Cities suffer from something called urban heat island effect, all that sunlight being trapped in the concrete, the tar roofs, and then emitted at night. That's why it never really cools down during a heat wave. You think it's going to be cool at 11 o'clock at night. You go sit on your stoop. It feels like midday. That's urban heat island effect at work. We're also crucial for stormwater management. New York City and a lot of older cities have major stormwater management issues. It's a whole long story that I invite you to research. You should be aware of just what a crisis it is, but basically we have way too much stormwater and human sewage use entering our system, and our farm acts like a giant sponge, slows the rate at which that stormwater moves through our system and hits the drains, allowing the city to catch up with the other rainfall that's hit the city. And we create an ecosystem for the native pollinators, the migratory pollinators that pass through. We have a number, I grew up in the city, as Mark mentioned. I've never seen the insects, the birds that I've seen on our farm before in my life. Monarch butterflies flock to our farm, and this is a nice juvenile red-tailed hawk that was hunting for some lunch one day. And we add green space to the community, and I cannot overstate the importance of that. Produce is sold directly to the consumer. People will talk a lot about keeping trucks off the road. Honestly, it's a drop in the bucket. But it is kind of a wonderful thing to see our CSA members walk over to the farm, pick up their bag of vegetables. CSA is a weekly farm subscription, essentially. You subscribe to the farm season. And these folks often live within walking distance. So they'll walk over to the farm and walk their vegetables home. That's produce that's making it from seed to plate without ever using fossil fuels. And that is kind of an astounding thing in this day and age. But let's really talk about profitability, right? Because that's what we're focused on here today. We have a number of different revenue streams, and we're going to talk about all of them. But farmers for generations have been focused on diversification, right? You don't want to plant only one crop, because if you get a pest that attacks that crop, if you get a weather condition that wipes out that crop, you've got no harvest for the season. So diversification is a topic that's often discussed in the farm world, but we really take it beyond crop diversification, and we really diversify our revenue streams. First one's obvious. We grow and sell fresh produce. We focus on the most profitable produce, that being greens mix. And actually, if you notice here, tomatoes, if you combine heirloom tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, and beefsteak tomatoes, these are not beef tomatoes, they're beefsteak tomatoes, it would actually be right behind greens mix and arugula, followed by peppers, if you combine them. But the point of this slide is really to show you that we've focused the vast majority of our fields on our most profitable crops, and all the rest of this is a long tail. This is the stuff that keeps people coming to our farm stands. It's the stuff that keeps our CSA members signing up for our farm share, because the fact of the matter is nobody wants to shop from a salad greens and tomatoes farm. We also have found that microgreens are a tremendous enterprise for us. We grow them in a greenhouse. We make more money per square foot in that greenhouse than anywhere else in the field outside on the farm. And actually, microgreens and edible flowers are rapidly, these garnishy things are rapidly eclipsing field crops as our most profitable, so they're more profitable in a much smaller space than our entire outdoor space combined. And value-added products. I cannot tell you how many jobs I've worked where you're late on a deadline and somebody says to you, don't worry about it, it's not produce. Well, when you work on a farm, you have to worry about it. It's produce, it's perishable. Value-added products are great because they're not perishable. You can sell them over the winter. You're under less pressure to get them sold. And we have an apiary program. We have over 30 beehives all over 3 of the 5 boroughs. We also teach beekeeping classes and have a beekeeping apprenticeship program. And of course, as interest in beekeeping and honeybees increases, this arm of our business will see more and more attention from us as well. But really and truly, we are a diversified business. So this is a slide from the end of last year that shows you a couple different things. One, that we've gotten way better about categorizing our revenue. We were pretty lazy about it. We would throw a lot in that other category for a long time, but as we realized how important and how quickly our other revenue streams besides produce were growing, we started, okay, we have to spend some time and really break out this other category into the specific revenue streams that comprise it, because we need to know which of these categories really are profitable and which are just sort of, white noise. Which the profitable categories were, as you can see, D&I, which stands for Design and Installation. This is a little bit misleading. This was 2015. We designed and installed the green roof on Vice Media's headquarters. Deep-pocketed organization. It was a big project. So this 2014 is probably a little bit more accurate in terms of what we can expect for 2016 and beyond. But you'll see that we do a number of things here. Shoots, photo shoots, commercials, things like that, and events are a huge, huge part of our business. We're going to talk about each of them. So design and installation contracts are great because we're always looking at what is preventing us from scaling up each revenue stream. What's preventing us from scaling up farm produce and events? Square footage and seasonality. Design and installation is great because we can design and install sites all over the city and all over the world. We've consulted on projects internationally. So there's no physical constraints to it. And you're often working on these projects in winter and early spring when the farm and events are a little bit slower. We also are able to create green jobs with the design and installations arm. More than we are on our 2.5 acres of rooftop farms. We can create these green jobs, and this was always part of our mission, right? Remember those 3 Ps, people, we wanted to create these green jobs. So design and installations really allows us to do that in a way that we were not previously able to. Events and special programming has grown tremendously since we started the farm. We always knew, it was in our initial business plan. Let me stop for a second and tell you that when we were young and starting this project and naive and had no idea what we were doing, our initial business plan had us pegged to expand to 7 locations in the first 5 years of operation. We have 2 farms, okay? We're in our 7th season now. So we've passed that. The 5-year mark was 2015, spring 2015. We exceeded our revenue projections for the 5-year mark with only 2 farms as opposed to 7. And that is, it's just to give you an idea of how much we've really invested in these other revenue streams, events being chief among them. Events might seem like mission drift, right? You set out to help the planet and help the people. How are a bunch of people spending a lot of money to come to a dinner on your farm really making that happen for you? But the fact of the matter is, New York City is a city of 8 million people. That's our community. We also have a ton of international visitors. We feel, as urban farmers, that we have an obligation to meet these people where they live, to find points of entry, access points for each different type of person that lives in our city. If we wanted to just be left alone and farm, we should go and do that in a rural area that's remote and has much cheaper land and costs a lot less to build out than those slides that you saw early on with our startup costs. So we really have a diverse range of programming on the farm. And we really believe that this is going to be crucial to a lot of farmers who are trying to grow food sustainably. The sad fact of the matter is, the way our food system is built in this country, you can't really make money on food unless you're doing it wrong. So you've really got to think beyond just your farm and ask yourself, how does your community want to engage with your business, right? None of us are really yoga people. You won't find a lot of farmers who are willing to sit still and stop moving for long enough to practice yoga. But everybody wanted to practice yoga on the farm, so now we have yoga classes. Weddings, of course, are a huge business in general. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the top slides in a minute, but we really try and see our farm from an outsider's perspective and look at what they might be interested in, and here it is. I'll tell you right now, 4th of July. We used to love having our friends up for 4th of July and just doing like a little friends and family thing. Now, that one event comprises a whopping 70% of our annual events revenue because it is such a popular destination for people to come to. All this other stuff, this is our marketing budget. All these ticketed workshops, education, we do like 100 of these. We do like 10 times, this is one event, makes up almost as much revenue as the 100 ticketed workshops, educational workshops that we do. That's our marketing budget right there. This is another, just sort of to give you an idea, this is our total revenue as well, of how diversifying our revenue streams has really, really improved our bottom line. Looking ahead, we are signing a lease imminently on a 3rd site where we will be investing even further in events. We will be building a 4-season events hall where we'll be doing business year-round. We'll finally be able to accept those holiday party requests that come in every year when we have to tell people, we'll probably be under a blanket of snow by Christmas time. And we're very excited about that. It's also important, though, to know when not to try and monetize. Back when we first started the farm, we were really overwhelmed by requests from teachers and camp counselors and school group organizers to bring their kids up to the farm. And it was kind of the private schools at first that found us. You know, they have the teachers who have the time and resources to look for folks like us. So they all said, we have budget, we have field trip budget, we'll pay you to bring the kids by. We thought it was another revenue stream, great. But then we got the call from the Title I school, and as a New York City public school kid myself, I mean, you know, I didn't get to go to farms as a kid. Those were the kids I really wanted to bring up to the farm. So I said, don't worry about the fee, we'll make an exception, just get the kids up here. And then we got another call from another Title I school and another, and 10 hours a week of exceptions later, we realized, first of all, this was possibly not the strongest revenue stream, but that didn't mean it wasn't something that we really wanted to do. We wanted to do it well. But we're not trained educators, and we're not in nonprofit development. So my partner, who has a background, Gwen Chance, in 501c3 nonprofit, did all the legal legwork during the government shutdown of establishing a 501c3 nonprofit organization called City Growers. City Growers is an incredible grassroots group of folks. Started with one hire, our executive director, Kara Chard, who had a tremendously limited, I think we applied for a grant that got her about 6 months of funding just for her. She ran that program alone for a good long time. It has now grown into a number of amazing educators who've brought 25,000 kids to our farm since 2011. It is what makes me proudest about my work, seeing these kids get excited. The mini heart attacks I have when I hear a kid scream and I think, oh God, what happened? And turns out they pulled a carrot out of the ground for the first time. This is what makes our farm really and truly an integrated member of the community. And I want to just take a moment to address that because, you know, we heard from Sandra Clark, who was talking about being facilitators of connections. And that's really what local is all about, right? It's about finding your community and engaging them through partnerships. And that, I think, is just, it cannot be underestimated. I think to really create a healthy business ecosystem, we need healthy partnerships. Look, we're never going to be amazing educators, my business partners and I, nor are we, as I said, in nonprofit development. City growers, they're not farmers, they're not entrepreneurs. They're not good at negotiating commercial leases. They're not good at setting up irrigation systems. We're able to do those things and create for them a living learning laboratory where they can bring kids to do their phenomenal work. It's a really wonderful partnership that allows us both to really do what we do well. And look, they haven't all been success stories. We had an indoor mushroom growing operation at one point that we abandoned because, you know, it was a square peg in a round hole. And Gordon Borrell talked about helping the advertiser tell their story well. Well, you know, at the end of the day, mushrooms were not telling our story well. We weren't telling their story well, and we abandoned that. And we get more calls today about our mushroom program than, you know, there's tremendous interest in mushrooms. People are obsessed with mushrooms. It just wasn't the right fit for us, so we walked away from it. And that's an important lesson that we've learned as well, is knowing when to say uncle. But really, it's about, as businesses, there's only so much you can do well yourself, especially when you're trying to hit all three of those P's. So we firmly believe that creating partnerships to help create this really, really strong business ecosystem, we're able to give our local community a sense of agency, right? A sense of being part of a community. And I think that that's what local is all about. People want to come to our farm. They want to get involved. That's the #1 email I get. And yes, I'm that crazy business operator who still checks every single email 6.5 years in. I like to know what are people interested in with our business. They want to get involved. And I think this is so clutch these days. I think people really feel a little bit helpless. They feel a little bit that everything's beyond their reach. So by making them feel like part of a local community, and partnerships are a great way to do that, bring other people's networks in to create this local community, I think we're really able to succeed in ways that we cannot by ourselves. So I'm going to propose the quadruple bottom line business and add partnerships as a 4th P. And in closing, I would just say that, you know, I think we're only scratching the surface in terms of digital might seem scary, but if we can think about it as a way to find new partners. Hey, I mean, we have made this business work without any foot traffic over the years, so I'm a huge fan of digital. But I think it can actually help strengthen local communities in ways that we never anticipated.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And again, remember your questions.
I've decided that I only ever want to speak with Anastasia from now on because that's so exciting. He gave my bio, and so I work in business and media stuff now, but my first career in journalism was I was an environmental reporter, and I wrote specifically about sustainable agriculture and a lot of these same things, and I was like, how am I ever going to have these two things fit together again? Today I found out. Yes, that's me. Thanks. Great. So, is this the right one? So I've taken a lot of inspiration from my reporting work in general. Let me get this going. And I think borrowing from a lot of the industries that we know a lot about that are not necessarily our own is a great way to think about how to make money in journalism. Revenue diversification is something that lots of industries are familiar with, but it's not something that we have really thought a great deal about ourselves in media. So one of the other things that I reported on for a long time, my bio he already sort of read you, so I'll skip past this, was that I was a reporter covering manufacturing and technology innovation. So I did a lot of traveling to factories and to meet with people who were sort of making things. So I was going to China back and forth, and I was following around a guy who was trying to make a electronic motor thing. And he set up an appointment at this factory that made go-karts, these things. And the factory was sort of this, big anonymous giant factory place, and you come in, and there's a showroom where they have all of the products that they make in their factories. So they had go-karts. They had go-karts like this one that were big and had big gas motors on them. They had electric motors, which is why we were there. They had cute little ones for kids that were sort of like pink and princessy looking and all this wild stuff. But then they also had a bunch of these, trampolines. And I was like, what in the world? Like, why are there trampolines here? Like, this is like a car company, basically. So, we go and they are sort of chatting and we sit in the business room. And then we went to the manufacturing floor. And once we got to the manufacturing floor, I was like, oh, I see what's happening here. So let's talk about how you make a go-kart. So the first thing that you do when you make a go-kart is you take these big, long pieces of metal and you use these big machines to bend that metal into various shapes. You powder coat them with some paint, and then you attach some springs to them. You add some seats, you add a motor, and you move on from there. How do you think you make a trampoline? You take these big, long metal pipes, and you machine bend them with these big machines, and you powder coat them with some paint, you attach some springs, and then you add the little jumping bed and some padding so kids don't hurt themselves. So on the surface, these two products seem like they have nothing really in common with one another. But on the back end, the organization that was making them was doing the exact same thing, just adding a couple of different steps at the end. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and it was like, right, what this company is they're not a go-kart business. They're a manufacturing business. And they're a machine bending, metal piping, powder coating, and spring attaching business. So what else could they do with that? It wasn't just go-karts. It was also trampolines. And who knows what else they're doing now. So in thinking about how this might be useful for my own work when I started doing a lot more revenue development for media companies, was thinking about how it's not that what we're doing is producing articles or video or broadcast segments or whatever media it is that you work in. What we're really doing here is we're building communities and we're finding information and we're making knowledge and we're telling stories and we're connecting with people emotionally, and that is our business. So what is it that you are really doing in your newsroom every day? And thinking about that as a foundation for how you do your job and what journalism looks like and what revenue opportunities that provides to you are sort of what I've been thinking a lot about lately. So I started thinking about what is your trampoline? I joined ProPublica just almost exactly a year ago. And here's an example of sort of what it is that I'm working on there. So like every newsroom, we have reporters, and we send them out into the field to become very expert in something. So Charlie Ornstein is our healthcare reporter, and he goes out into the field, and he learns everything there is to know, as far as I can tell, about healthcare, about insurance, about pharmaceutical companies, about doctors. He understands this landscape intensely well. So for years and years and years, he took his work doing things like researching the Medicare and the Medicaid system and looking at the data there. And he would write stories. So, look at the data, analyze it, come up with some new information, some new findings, and write a text story. So that's great. But really, if we've sent Charlie out into the field for decades at this point in his career, and one article is the output of a year's worth of work, or 6 months of work, or 3 months, or even a week, really, that one story, is that really capturing all of the value of Charlie's labor? Are we really, getting enough bounce out of that? So at ProPublica, one of the things that they started doing well before I got there was taking that data that he was using in his reporting and making it accessible to other people. So we told our story with the people, but we also, with the data, but then we also turned it into these applications where people could tell their own story about their own doctors so they can look up the information. So we framed the story for them and we said, here, look up this information about your doctor. We've done some reporting on pharmaceutical payments to healthcare providers. And so we said, look up your doctor and see what that means. You can read our story, help put it in context and move forward. And that helped us get a lot more sort of journalistic value and more longevity. So this is one of our most popular things on our website. Constantly, people are using it, looking up their doctors, using it to inform their healthcare decisions. But we also started to get phone calls from people about, hey, we're interested in using this data, but the way that your search is structured, we can't look up all of the payments made to, OBGYNs in Kentucky by 4 different pharmaceutical companies. Can you help us get that information? So after hearing enough requests like that, my colleague Scott Klein and his data team figured out that maybe we should find a place to distribute our data in other forms online. So the people who want to tell their own stories that are different from the ways that we're looking at that data can do the same thing. So we put up the ProPublica data store in February of 2014. And it includes free data sets. We do a lot of public records requests, FOIA requests. So we put all of that information that we get for free online. We also provide links to other data that we've used in our reporting. That way it becomes a sort of clear central repository for all the ways that you can interact with our data. We also sell the data sets behind our big investigations where we spend a lot of time really working with the data, really cleaning it, analyzing it, matching it with other data sets, pouring months of work into it in really unique ways. We often have data sets that nobody else has. So we've been doing that for several years now, and we've seen a lot of good results. So other journalists, we offer discounted prices for them if they want to come in and report their own stories. We'll help them do some custom data work. Say you just want doctors in Boston, or you just want doctors in Montclair. We can do that for you. Academics oftentimes are looking for data for their research. They have research budgets for buying data, so they pay us a little bit more. And then commercial customers, like Yelp, have come to us and asked to use our data. So from our reporting projects, we have lots of detailed information about people like doctors or hospitals, nursing homes, ERs. And so Yelp has partnered with us to purchase access to all of our healthcare data sets. And they're making it available on healthcare provider profiles. So it's revenue for us, important revenue, but it's also impact, because if you're looking for a doctor on Yelp and you're trying to make a decision, right now when you're making that choice, here is information from ProPublica about that provider or that facility. This one is about ER wait times. So how long are you going to wait if you go to this emergency room? How is the doctor's communication? How quiet are the rooms on average? And then you can give us feedback and tell us if you found this useful. To my amazement, people do that. And they come to Yelp and they look up an emergency room, and then they go to the emergency room, and then they come back and they tell us about their experience, which I find incredible. I would never do that. But people do it. So we're expanding the number of data sets that Yelp is using, and so they're doing more of that. And so thinking about this way where, we just took this one activity that Charlie was doing. He was reporting out stories with data about healthcare, and the ways that it has sort of become tools for consumers that didn't necessarily have revenue, but became a very important part of our organization and supported some of our fundraising as a nonprofit. It became a store where we sell data to other journalists, to academics, and to customers like Yelp. And that it also is now making its way into the hands of people like this. It's also being used by regulators and law enforcement officers and all kinds of other people to actually make decisions in their own lives. So I'm pretty excited about this as a business opportunity for us. And so actually, as of right now, I think while we are standing here, the data store is relaunching with a whole new site. So rather than that other one, which was like just a straight list of data sets, now there's a lot more sort of searchability, and we've added a lot more data. So we're also partnering with other news organizations that have data sets. In the last 3 years since we launched, lots of organizations have started to invest more heavily in data journalism. And so lots of people are working with information about their state's education system or police actions in their city. And so more people are looking for ways to get that out into the world and also to try to find ways to make money from it. So we're opening our store up to other people. Not everyone has as much data as we do, so it probably doesn't make sense for everyone to launch their own data store, but like you were saying, partnerships are a good way that we think we can support other news organizations that are trying to capture some of this same revenue diversity that we've benefited from. One of the questions that I've gotten a lot lately, and this is one of the first times that we're actually really talking about the numbers around the store, over the last 3 years, we've had about 4,500 free data sets that were downloaded directly from our website. We also link out to a lot of other places where people download the data, but that's just the ones that are hosted by us, just about a dozen of those. For our premium products, the ones with higher price tags, we've sold more this year than in the past 2 years combined. We've seen that sort of growing steadily, and I think that with somebody on staff for the first time now, me, selling that, we're going to continue to really grow that business substantially. Over the past 3 years, we've done more than $200,000 in sales, and that number grows meaningfully every single year. So I was at another conference recently talking about the store, and there was a lot of grumbling that a lot of these new revenue streams are too small for organizations to really invest in. But we started this with borrowed developer time, and we just put up a very simple website initially. It's not a fancy e-commerce system. It's basically just some download links and some emails. That's really how it worked for the first 3 years. It was not a costly or difficult operation to run. So we tested an idea and we got it up there and we started playing around with what could be done. And now that we've decided that this is a meaningful opportunity for us, we're investing in it and we're going to grow it. So I think it's a really promising approach, and I think people shouldn't be afraid to try small things. In your slides, I mean, just sort of looking at sort of the total revenue, a lot of the things that are now really big business for the Grange are things that started off incredibly small. It was an event that you were like, oh, this is kind of fun, and maybe we could make more money and do something better. Or, oh, sure, we'll design a garden for you, but maybe this is a business we could grow. So look for those opportunities in your own newsroom, and there's huge opportunities there. So this year has been a really good one. Year to date, we've already done more sales than any previous total year. That was true halfway through the year. This is sort of an old slide in that sense. We introduced recurring revenue products, so people don't just buy the data once, they buy it on subscription. And so every year now, I'm guaranteed that bit of money from a client who wants that same data every year that we have it. We're partnering with these other news organizations. And we're also looking at sort of what's next. With the increased use of data in all kinds of organizations, not just newsrooms, but places like Yelp, places like, hospitals, and just to keep focusing on the healthcare section, there are a lot more ways in which people would like to integrate our data into their systems. So we're developing more ways for developers to take our data and push them out on demand to lots of other folks. So we have a new API product that'll be coming out later this winter that I developed jointly with the newsroom. So I sat down with the reporters who were working on projects and I said, here's a commercial idea I have that I think also maps to what you're talking about wanting to do with some of our data. And so I think that's a really exciting opportunity because it really came with creativity from the editorial team. The data store is one kind of revenue diversity for us. I mean, it's about paid content, which basically everybody thinks of as a subscription model or a premium thing. But it's not really just about sort of creating better premium content. Paid content is really about having the right content in the right context for the right audience. And thinking about what are those opportunities that are coming out of your business and out of your newsroom that present opportunities like the data store for you. It's not just about selling data. So to go back to sort of the trampoline analogy, there's a good series of ways I think you can think about how to apply these in any business, but especially in newsrooms. What is it that you're doing already? As local news publishers, where are your reporters spending their time? Who are you working with? Who do they know? What are they really experts in? What are the relationships that they're building from? How your product gets made, how you put out your paper or your website publication every single day. How does that happen? That matters. So thinking about sort of what those steps are and what people are doing can really spark a lot of new ideas for you that don't cost you a great deal of extra work. I think one of the great examples of this is actually IKEA. To sort of go outside journalism again for another analogy. This is less useful in part because we had the Grange conversation earlier, but IKEA has done a lot of work around thinking about sustainability in their business model, and they really see their entire production process as part of their innovation and their product. So they look for ways to just eliminate as much waste in their entire operation as possible. They redesigned everything to think about the kinds of shipping vehicles that things were going to fit into. They redesigned how products were cut out of individual materials so that they could minimize the amount of waste. And all of that increases the profitability of their company and also means sort of better products, less waste, happier customers. And in newsrooms, I think we could do a lot of that too. Our teams are doing an enormous amount of work. This is huge effort that we're putting into doing meaningful and important work that people care about. So let's get more value out of that. This is the inside of one of the tables that IKEA made. They figured out sort of that they could use cardboard cut in these particular ways, so they could use less material and it would be structurally stronger. And that's just like one example of the way that they really think through every single piece of how their product gets made. I will skip this. These slides will be available online if you'd like to look at them. Those are sort of the questions that I think you can think about. A lot of the conversation at conferences like this and in media discussions in general is about advertising. And we tend to think about our audience as sort of like, oh, the way that you monetize your audience is through advertising. But really, like, who do you work for? Is really the question that you're thinking about with audience. To some extent, traditional advertising business models for media companies were actually kind of a trampoline business model. What did companies had? They had distribution, they had printing presses, they had trucks, they had reach into people's homes, and that was really the only way for advertisers to get out in front of the people that they wanted to reach. So we were doing the thing that we were doing, and people were paying for our newspapers or whatever it was, and then advertisers were able to come alongside that. Now, that is maybe a less exciting business opportunity for us, and I think there are still opportunities, but just because advertising is a more challenging marketplace for us now doesn't mean there aren't other ways to think about your audience. So in the instance of sort of the go-kart trampoline business, so the manufacturer that I was at, their target customer wasn't the end user of the go-kart. They were distributing to sporting goods stores and all kinds of other places. And what were those customers interested in that they could also sort of add to their bundle when they were sort of selling them something? How could they sort of extend that? And trampolines were a good fit. They already had part of that audience, but they could extend into it. The customer overlap wasn't necessarily exactly the same, but it was a place where they had an understanding of what that market looked like and who might be the buyers and how they purchase things. So it was a real understanding of their audience in addition to their own activities and their own process that made that kind of a business model possible. So, I mean, that's the idea, is that every media company is a niche media company. You have your own opportunity to find people and reach them where they are. I mean, in the same way that Anastasia was talking about, all of the kinds of people in your community and coming up with a service for them, whether it's, yoga classes and weddings and events, or if it's data sales, APIs, news applications, and stories, you can really think across the kinds of people that are there. I heard a really smart presentation from an editor at BuzzFeed one time talking about how they think about growing their market. And obviously their strategy is to get as many people in the world reading their stuff as possible. But the same model I think applies to all of us when she said, we look at our traffic data and we say, who are we reaching? And instead of saying, how do we monetize those people, we say, who are we not reaching? And what do we need to do to serve those people better? Where are we under-indexing on a population that we think we could capture? And then they do a bunch of test content to try to reach that audience, because they say, we already know how to do our thing. Can we do our thing for this group of people? And so I think the example she was talking about was around diversity and sort of how they were sort of realizing that there were a lot more Black women that they weren't reaching. And so how did they think about that? And they hired writers who really focused on that, and they really turned to the attentions of this particular population that they wanted to reach more effectively. And they did that work, and that then grew their reach, their penetration into the online advertising market, and was very sort of successful for them. And I think that that's true and goes well beyond advertising in terms of developing new products and services and opportunities to reach people. So same questions, those are available if you want to look at them later. But I mean, you're a journalist. these are your superpowers. Like, you know how to ask questions, you know how to tell stories, you know how to sort of frame conversations for people and think about how to reach them where they are. When you tell a story, you're never just sort of telling a story to anybody. Like, I'm telling this story about my work to you guys because in this way, because I know that you all work in journalism. And if I was talking to somebody outside journalism, we wouldn't be having this conversation in the same way. So that's true. Like, use that skill to think about your business too. So, stay in touch.
Great, thank you. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm sure you all have a lot of questions for our two panelists, so let's start. Yes?
Hi, my name is LeCompte. I'm co-founder of a news company in Atlantic City. It's currently run more or less as a hobby. We'd love to do more with it, but we're having trouble making kind of revenue streams stick, and I think it's because we don't have an audience. So I was wondering whether maybe both of you could kind of talk about whether there is any revenue, something that became a revenue stream that started as like an audience engagement effort, or like an event that didn't cost very much to put on, that took off, or maybe you could talk a bit more about the data that you are charging people for, because I didn't really understand exactly what the difference was between the voice stuff and the...
Sure. I'll just, a quick anecdote. We do something called the Butcher Paper Dinner Series, where we put butcher paper on this big wooden table we have at our flagship farm because rentals are really expensive and a pain in the butt to haul upstairs. So we designed this event to just, we put butcher paper down and just dump food on the table for people to eat with their hands. And we had to beg people to buy tickets to this thing for years. And now we put the schedule through October on our website in March, and it sells out in about a week. And as our audience has grown, we've started adding more things like lobster boils, whereas it used to just be, very inexpensive food. And we've started tailoring more to this new market, but at first we really had no market. So it was really about how can we create a product that costs us almost nothing, actually gives us back something, because we needed compost, we needed compostables. So all this butcher paper at the end, we roll it up with all these crab shells, throw it in the compost pile, we've got fertilizer for our farm. So we're actually essentially making money even if we sold only enough tickets to break even. And then slowly over a number of years, it's become a significant revenue stream.
Celeste?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the data store example, is a thing that literally our reporters put together these enormous data sets. So we request public data and we download data for free, but your question was also like, what else are you doing? We're actually adding a lot of value. We have our reporters who spend literally months going through and taking, I don't know if any of you have worked with public data, it is not usually very clean, it's totally disorganized.
So is that, because we have loads of stuff up on Document Cloud, for example, that probably people would look at, like maybe associate the name of our business with that, but yeah. So are they just kind of putting stuff into tables or putting it into Excel?
Yeah, so I mean, most of our stuff are multiple tables, CSV files, essentially. So, like our healthcare data sets will oftentimes have the records of, say, dollars for docs, since that was the example I was using. It'll be the payments that pharmaceutical companies made to doctors and a record for each one of those payments. And then another table that's all of the doctors that are in that data set with information about them and where they're located and what their specialty is. Summary tables detailing sort of, what I'm trying to think what's in this one. There are 4 tables, I don't know, at any rate, more summary information about what it is that you'll find in the data. So sort of what we have done is we've already figured out how to tell a story with the data, so we sort of know what kinds of questions you might want to ask about it. And so we've put all of that information in there. So we're often pulling together things from 2 to 5 sources to make one data set.
So what I'm hearing, and we'll get to the next question, is that, best ideas come from serendipity. So how do you create serendipity? It sounds from both of your presentations is that you create serendipity by trying stuff, knowing that you're going to fail in a lot of it. But it's not like you can institutionalize serendipity, or can you?
You can, I think, to an extent. You're in a very fortunate place, which is that you don't have an audience yet. So you get to pick who you want your audience to be, right?
I bet you never thought of it that way.
Do you want your audience to be, so I was just going to say, do you want your audience to be locals? Do you want it to be tourists? The area you're in, if you want to attract a tourist market, like there are places that tourists go to find out what's happening in this area. Can you provide those places some data that's attributable back to you and start to siphon off their audience?
And I think also what was really great about this was talking about the back end of the journalism process. Like, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but like when you're doing video and audio and text, you actually are forced to think a bit more about the creation process.
Right. And
you realize that you can be much more efficient and put a package together. But I hadn't really thought about the fact that, like, even if I want to do like a 3-month reporting project and I've got nothing to show for it in 1 week, maybe I can start putting some of the stuff that I've got from it in some format that somebody might want to use online.
Good. Thank you. Another question. Yes. Hi.
Hi. Actually, building off of that, the points that
Can you speak up just a little?
Sorry. Allergies. I'm Megan Murphy with the Online News Association, and just like building off of this point about serendipity and things like that, that was going to be a question that I had, because I think part of it is about just having an idea that someone comes up with that you're willing to run with, but part of it is about bringing people into the fold and into the conversation and giving them a seat at the table who perhaps have different perspectives. And Celeste talked about coming from a totally different background. Do you see that as the power of your organizations that you work with, of bringing people who have a different perspective to the table, diversity and background and all these different things, and then giving them a voice? Or do you see that imbued in your organization, and do you think that helps this process?
Yes.
Emphatically, yes.
Yeah. I mean, you have no idea what's useful to other people unless you have other people in the room, right? Like, I just can't even imagine the ways that we could come up with ideas about who might find something that we're doing useful that we never thought of without talking to those people. So I mean, from my own experience, reporting is the skill that I bring to the table around that, right? I'm happy to go to a healthcare conference and talk to people and figure out what works for them and what doesn't. But, what else is there? Like, there are all kinds of ways to do that, so.
Any more questions? So, yes.
Brain process question. When it comes to like your commercial customers on the data sets, so Yelp, for example, do they come to you all and say, we want this data set, or are you actively pursuing commercial customers?
That's a good question.
To date, it's all inbound sales. So we have our website up and people come to us. Next year, I'm hoping to do a little bit more outreach and marketing. I have some stuff that I think is valuable and also would fill our impact mission in a way that I'm interested in. So,
speaking as someone who spent most of his career in broadcast journalism, local, national, public radio, I think one of the hardest things is to go from this idea of, we're setting an editorial agenda, we're smart, we know what the viewer, listener, reader wants. And I think that there's just such a left turn that some people are having a hard time, making that left turn. And it's funny because I think when Anastasia was talking, it was easier for me because she's not in our field. She's not in our field. Of course she's doing that. It's more interesting, not more interesting, but it's like when you talk about it, it's like though I was in broadcast and you came out of print, it's like, wow, she made that left turn. How would you both characterize how you train your brain? Is it just fear of hunger? How do you do that?
I mean, that's a great question. I think there's certainly fear of hunger on our part. It was, I hurt my back our second season farming, and I literally was like, I have to create revenue to pay myself now because I can't bartend and I can't farm. So there was literally a fear of hunger there. And that's really how our events program was born. But to your point about sort of knowing your audience, I mean, when we were first looking for rooftops, we could not get landlords to call us back when we realized we were barking up the wrong tree. We were looking at these old manufacturing buildings where these guys didn't want to rock the boat. They were just waiting till their neighborhood was rezoned so they could sell their land at a huge profit. It wasn't until we started hitting up these young developers who were everybody was trying to attract the Google into their building. These were the folks who saw value, cultural value, not financial value in us. And it was an audience we didn't know we had. And we really had to be receptive to it in order to realize it. We spent years being reactive rather than proactive, and we're just now starting to be more proactive as a business. It's just a listening game. It's constantly a listening game, and a lot of it has to do with data. That's why I think what you're doing is just so smart.
I mean, the listening thing is so true, though. So every place, I mean, the hunger question, right? So like every place that I have ever worked is now out of business, and and hope not because of me, but I mean, just because of the changes in our industry, and I think sort of seeing over and over and over the way in which the media companies that I was working for, or small organizations, were tying their survival to an advertising, we know best kind of approach. Just wasn't working. So like, okay, you can't keep doing that. You have to find something else to do. And I thought one of the most promising things, and GigaOM is now also out of business, but for reasons that had very little to do, I think, with the product that I worked on there, was we said, you know, we have this big audience of people, but like, we're only getting this much value out of our relationship with them. Like, how can we look at that audience and figure out who wants to engage more deeply with us? You know, what do they want? So we had a conference business that was very successful, and those people were like, they were all in. They wanted to come hang out with us for a couple of days. They wanted to write us big checks for, you know, sponsorship or event attendance. But were there things in the middle that we could do? And so that was specifically how we came after the research market, was like, what do we already do? You know, we're experts in these areas that are sort of poorly covered everywhere else. And there are people who want to engage with us more than just reading our stuff online, but, you know, they've come to the events, but there's a gap in their relationship with us that we think we could get more value out of. And so it was really about sort of listening to where there was a deeper relationship that was possible. And I think when you're just like shouting your stories out at a bunch of people, that's not really thinking about how to build that relationship with them. So I think audience engagement is a core part of this revenue diversity.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but fortunately, there's lunch. First of all, thank you to our two wonderful panelists. How does ProPublica and Brooklyn Grange fit together? Perfectly, in terms of the message, at least. And thank you all for joining us and for engaging with us. And it's time for lunch.
Thanks to our moderator.
Oh.
Yes.